Hi, and I'm got Davis Ashura here with me today, author of The Testament of Steel. It's an absolute smash success. Um, Makes us all jealous, Davis. I hope you know that. Uh,
You've got your own
so
books done
thanks for
well.
coming to speak with me. Would you like to? It's not a race, is it? Do you
No,
want to introduce yourself to those who may not know who you are, and maybe give us a random fun fact about yourself to get going?
sure. I'm Davis Ashura. I write epic fantasy novels that have a lot to do with my Indian heritage as far as the background is concerned. Um, and I'm sitting here in my medical office, so that's my fun fact. I've got a medical office.
Yeah, you must have. Do you ever? I guess you must pull on a lot of that for your writing, or do people come bugging you for questions?
You mean as far as medical issues are concerned?
Well, yeah, I've got one friend who's a doctor, and I'm always asking him questions
Oh,
about
right. Yeah.
wounds and what kind of injuries can be sustained realistically, and how long will it take to recover from a broken rib and stuff like that, so I can put it into the book properly.
So, my the kind of practice that I do, I have to actually ask other doctors those questions myself just to make sure that I understand those things. But having that background definitely helps because you can think of creative ways of killing somebody if they need killing, or injuring them if they need injuring. So that can be fun just to know that kind of information. But in general, I wouldn't say that I use it a ton just because I write epic fantasy novels, and it's not about the medicine in those situations. It's more about story elements that we like in those kind of situations, whether it's magic or mystery or what have you. So I don't generally use my medical knowledge as much as people might think.
Hmm. That's interesting. You always assume that you might, but when it comes to the story, everything else comes first. Like, and you're probably quite right to avoid too much detail because you could get bogged down probably very quickly in that detail, that level of depth. For those listening eventually that haven't come across your latest series, do you want to give us a quick pitch about it and let us know a little bit more about what it's about?
Sure. So the current series is called Instruments of Omen, The Instruments of Omens. And there's two books out, A Testament of Steel and Memory of Prophecies. And it's connected to my other books that I've written, which are The Cast and the Outcasts, which is a trilogy, and The Chronicles of William Wilde, which there's five books in that. It's set in late 20th century America. So it's kind of weird that you've got this secondary world epic fantasy that's somehow linked to a series set in 1980 Cincinnati, Ohio, and then this third series, which is set in a different world. Um, but they are linked together. There's two characters that sort of connect and bridge all the different stories together. And in this particular one, they don't remember themselves. So there's a lot of discovery of who they are, what they mean to each other, why they're connected, and how that comes about as part of the mystery of the story itself. And it's a lot of fun. I didn't intend to write a series that was so um, or a set of books that were so interlinked, but um, one of the characters decided, hey, I belong in all of them, and she ended up belonging in all of them. So there you have it.
So forced herself in. So it's your own version of the Cosmere.
Yeah,
I
it's
wasn't aware that the William Wilde books were connected at all. I knew that the case books was connected to this
yeah.
new one, but I had no idea about the urban fantasy. That's taken me by surprise. That does beg the question as to how they're connected. So yeah, that does does make me want to find out in some way.
Yeah, it
And
took
so
me
you
by
didn't mean
surprise.
for
So
this sprawling. You
no,
didn't mean
not at
for this
all.
sprawling interconnected. No, yeah. So
No,
why did it come about? Did it just feel natural to keep them together, or
no.
tell
So I
me
was
how that happened?
I was writing chapter one of William Wild, and in the very first scene, William is going to a high school that's kind of reminiscent of the one that I went to. I went to a Catholic Jesuit high school that was all boys. This one is a Catholic Jesuit high school in Cincinnati, where I'm from, but it's co-ed. And he's walking down the hall and he sees this young woman, a freshman. She looks lost. He asks her, can I help you get to your class? And she says, sure. He asks her name, and it's the same name as the main character from Cast and the Outcasts. And suddenly I had a Cosmere, which I never intended, but she insisted she belonged there. As far as Instrument of Omens, um, it was kind of funny while I was writing William Wyler, there kept scenes from that new series kept cropping up, and I'd have to take little notes for myself. And it was something I've always wanted to write, which is basically a giant, sprawling, epic fantasy that has, thousands of years of history that feel real. And
Yeah.
and so it's kind of my love letter in a lot of ways to Wheel of Time and Lord of the Rings. And I'm pretty open about saying those were the inspirations for how that story came about. I just wanted to write something of that kind of scale. I just think those are brilliant stories.
It's just something about being completely lost in them for a while, just
Yeah.
immersing in so completely that it's hard to replicate that feeling. I think a lot of the time when we I don't know about yourself, but I get you can be quite cagey in epic fantasy picking up a new series. You're almost afraid to be hurt or let down by it.
Hmm.
And I think we're all in some way still chasing that first hit
Oh
of when we
yeah.
first read whatever series it was. For everyone's going to be a little different, but whatever that first really immersive experience was, we're all kind of chasing that a little bit. Um, and I think for most of us, we still haven't quite found it yet. Maybe we never
Oh,
will. It's just so magical that first exploration. Um, I don't even know if it was Lord of the Rings or Harry Potter for me. It all kind of happened at the same time. Was that the first one for you, Rings, or was it something different?
no, it was probably Lord of the Rings. So, I had an unusual entrance into it. I started out reading a bunch of Greek/Roman mythology, Norse mythology, and somehow I trailed into The Hobbit. That was when I was, what, 13, I think. And then everything changed with The Hobbit. It's like that's what I wanted to read. I read tons of sci-fi, and of course The Hobbit, then Lord of the Rings. And then, there was so much stuff back in the 80s that tried to fill that sort of void that Lord of the Rings left, like everything from Shannara to David Eddings to Thomas Covenant. None of them really could quite do it, at least for me, until Wheel of Time, and then it was like, wow, that's really cool. I want to do that. And and speaking about this large scale and history and all that, you've got that yourself in your new series also, and I've really enjoyed it quite a bit.
Oh, thanks, man. Yeah, I think I've taken one foot off the gas in terms of the history and the
Hmm.
things like that. It's very hinted at. I didn't want to well build out the heck out of it because um, I had a lot of food magic to focus on and things like that. Um,
Right,
but it's certainly part. I think it's like showing that iceberg. Like I really want to focus on the magic side of things and really make that feel really fleshed out and immersive. I do have plans one day to do a kind of really big, really big epic, but based off of sort of like the Scottish Wars of Independence. They're not. They're
right,
sometimes called the Scottish Wars now. Your Wallace, your Bruce, because that time period is much more like Game of Thrones than the War of the Roses, in my opinion. And so,
right.
like, I feel like there can be a lot of good material out of that, and that would be a bit more on the side of like all that history with depth and stuff like that. But I'm glad that what's in songs is working for you. I mean, that's a huge compliment.
Yeah, I've enjoyed it quite a lot, and I think the Blind Dragon is probably the most interesting character choice I've ever come across as far as dragons are concerned. There's so many dragons that get bound to a person, but a blind one is unique. I like him.
That's good. I mean, that was the aim. I wish there was a more profound reason for it other than that. I knew I wanted Ash to be unique and to overcome challenges, and I was watching Daredevil, and I thought Daredevil's
Yeah,
really awesome,
I mean,
and
there's
why not make the
Daredevil's
dragon
just,
blind?
I mean, Daredevil's not just a blind person, and that's why you love him. There's so much about Daredevil to love.
Yeah,
He just happens to be blind, and it's the same with your dragon. There's a lot that to love about him. He just happens to be blind. That's just an aspect of him. But I think it's an interesting choice. I don't know if I've ever done that myself where well, actually, I guess I kind of have because my characters constantly have amnesia in Instrument of Omen. So they're constantly
never
struggling
thought
like, why are we doing this? When do we get to take a
about
break from it?
that. Well, you, it was a little, yeah. I don't know if I mean doing it to the dragon is was almost a little bit of a cheat. I think I'd have to be a better or braver writer to try and doing it to a proper POV character because losing the sense would be tricky.
Yeah,
Although I mean there's elements of that that come into book two for whole a little bit, um, I suppose, but not seriously. Um, but yeah, it's tricky because you don't want to necessarily limit yourself in that regard. Though it seems scary, but um, it did force me into interesting spaces for the bonding and how they would develop a friendship, and like it made that much more interesting because the situation is very unique. So it did help actually. I think we'll see where it goes. I haven't quite figured it out yet.
yeah. I'm working on book three of Instruments right now, and it was, I really thought I was done at the end of August. There's this big
Right.
fantasy convention here in the U.S. called Dragon Con every Labor Day, which is, towards the end of August, early September. And I even typed in the words "the end," thinking I was done. And then, it's funny how I'm not really a pantser. I'm more of a plotter. But even though I plotted it out and I got to the end and I thought I was done, when I went back and started editing it and I got to this chunk of of the story where I just thought this is not this is unnecessary. It's not bad
Right.
writing or anything. It's just these scenes don't belong. And suddenly, I'm backtracking and taking out all these scenes and trying to figure out where does this story really end. And so that's actually what I'm doing this weekend. I'm getting to a proper ending, so I'm kind of
Right.
excited.
How much did you have to take out?
There were 34,000 words, and I had to shrink that down to 14,000. And
Wow.
really, the problem is that with this story being connected to William Wilde, so these characters, Sindra and Anya, the main characters in Instrument of Omens, they appear in William Wilde also. And trying to link those two timelines
Mm.
together and not contradict myself has been an absolute pain. And making sure to
Right.
always look like, when is this actually happening? When's this happening in the timeline? And putting it together. And then realizing that there were story elements from William Wilde that I have to introduce just so you know, it makes sense as a cohesive whole,
Okay.
all three series.
Is it are they like chronologically? Is it chronological or are they happening in parallel with each other? Those two
So
series.
they're partly occurring in parallel to each other. And so whatever I've already
Wow.
discussed in William Wilde, I have to make sure
Yeah.
I discuss in in a Necessary Heresy book three. And
Yeah.
there are aspects of what I discussed in William Wilde that make what I've already written in Instrument of Omens a challenge to get from where I am with the characters to where they are in William Wilde so that, I can end up where I eventually want to be. That's been hard. It's taken a couple of months to get that back in gear. But I'm really happy with the way I'm happy that I noticed the problem and was able to fix it.
Yeah. Better before releasing than after
Oh
releasing for
gosh,
sure.
yeah. Because I,
They
I think it would have been, I won't say a disaster, because I think it was still a good story, where it was at the end of August, but I just feel like it's getting to be, well, a much better story.
Yeah, you'll know it in your gut. You if you feel it's right, it'll be right. We've all
Yeah.
had those moments where we've had to backtrack. But I mean, you come across as extremely productive because whilst you are a proper best-selling author, you still keep your job as a physician, right? And so,
Yes.
how do you fit all that writing in? Because I feel ashamed that I am full time, but I don't get anywhere near the production that you do. Like, what's the secret? How do you do it?
Everyone asked that question. And so I think it boils down to the fact that I just don't watch much TV anymore. I'll watch, like right now, I'm watching Lock and Key, and I watch one episode a day. That's it. I don't binge all the episodes. It's just one a day, 1 hour. And so when you limit the TV and the internet time and the video gaming, that's how I can be productive because I don't do those other things. I kind of wish I could. Like in a perfect world, I'd work far less as a physician, like 2 days a week instead of full time, and write the other days and get to travel and watch a lot more stuff on Netflix.
Well, you say that, but then it seems to be working out. So I don't know. I think
Yeah,
we,
it's
I
working.
think we probably I could probably stand to watch. I've tried to shift away from certain online games, which has helped. But then I kind of filled that time with a little bit of TV as a sort of placebo almost. And then yeah, I'm in the midst of shifting around my routine and trying to be more productive. But I have noticed also within a daily word count sort of sense, and also within a year, I will be very productive in these little spikes of time, and otherwise it can be a little seemingly non-productive. But Unbound is 220 words, 220,000 words long, so quite long. And I think I started it last what, November, October, but by about
Right.
January, I'd only written about 40,000 words of it. It was very, very slow going. It took me a long time to get going. But then I wrote the rest of the book over about 4 months. So it took me 4 months to kind of get less than a quarter of the way through it, and then over the next 4 months, the rest of it blasted out. So for whatever reason, this seems to always be the case. I sort of take a long time to rev up, and then I have extremely productive periods, and then it dips
Yeah.
down again. I prefer for it to be smooth because I would just feel better, but I don't know. Maybe that's just me. We've got a question from Vrix, which sort of dovetails onto what we're discussing there a little bit. Um, like, given that you have such a busy job, like, I mean, how do you find that motivation at the end to sit down and write? Is that your release? Is that sort of how you de-stress?
Yeah. I get home, I hang out with the family, my wife, watch some TV, eat some dinner, and then you know, it takes me a little bit to get going on the writing part. Sometimes I'll actually open a Word document and leave it open and then go do something else because I'm not ready to write yet. And
Yeah,
I'll
I
get
know
my
that feeling.
playlist up, and then that's another excuse to go do something else. And then usually at around 7:30 ish, I'm finally in the mood to write. And I try to write about an hour and a half to 2 hours and get what I want to get done. And it I won't say it calms me down, but it does get me past, especially this past year and a half. It's been brutal. Um, get me out of my own troubles and into somebody else's situation. So that's been that's that's a good thing.
Yeah. Do you find that during the day your mind kind of percolates on what you're going to write in the evening, and then when you get to it, it kind of comes out a little easier, or is it just as hard as is it just kind
It
of as it comes?
I'll think about the story like when I'm showering, when I'm eating, when I'm doing other stuff, but during the day there's not enough downtime to do that kind of stuff, and my focus is just on the people I'm seeing. I don't ever think about story elements at work, just unless it's at lunch, just because I my mind is on other stuff at that point. There's no way to distract myself. if that made sense.
Yeah, I think the answer would be kind of yes and no to some
Okay.
extent. With so yeah, but with all that considered, I mean, what's the most challenging element about this current series that you're writing?
It's definitely putting the timelines together. That has been so difficult because I got to go back and read William Wilde and read those sections and outline them so I know, okay, this is what happened here, and that's when it's going to happen in book
Yeah,
three. That's when it's going to happen in book four. I mean, I've got pages of just timeline stuff so that I don't contradict myself. And that's kind of a pain in the sense that you have to do all this research, but it's also a pain because you're forced into writing um, the story in a certain way. And I didn't realize how much I like to have the freedom of just doing whatever. But my past self, who I should slap about the face, put me in this corner and made me write this way.
yeah,
So I have to kind of do it this way. But I'm
yeah. Cursing your past self for sticking you in this position.
yes, I'm definitely cursing my past self. He thought he was so cool, coming up with story ideas, and in hindsight, it's like you're an idiot. You just
We did
let
that.
you put all
I,
these you put all these cool elements and let somebody else have to pick up the pieces to make sure they work, and they do. It's just, man, it's hard.
yeah, I mean that must be really hard. It's hard enough even just within a single book, never mind the same series. Sometimes you go back, you know, how did I describe that person in Ascendant or Unbound? And I'm like, oh, why did I do that?
Yeah, right. I mean,
I have a better idea now, but I can't use it because they've got whatever their costume is. Like I can't, or something. Just even something silly like that. Sometimes you're like, damn it, like
yeah.
now I can't change that.
So, I mean, absolutely. Like when you when you have to know what they're wearing, what their eye color is, what their hair color is, and that was like 3 years ago. So then you have to go write it all down so you don't forget, and so you can always just look at it later on. But
Sounds like you need sounds like you need someone to make a wiki for you.
yeah, if somebody felt like doing that, I'd be thrilled. I'd be happy. But book four will be a lot easier on me just because I get to open up and have freedom on how the story develops. And I'm really happy with book three now. And I'm really looking forward to book four eventually.
Good. I'm glad it got there. Um, it's always a relief when you feel happy with it in the end.
Do you have to take like a like when you finish a book, do you feel like you need to take a palate cleanser and write something else or do something else? Have you ever had that issue?
Um, I don't know if deliberately. I mean, after Dragon's Blade, I wrote Battle Spy, and that felt like a palate cleanser. And that was the quickest book I ever wrote by a long way. That just poured out of me. It came out
Mhm.
incredibly fast. Um, but between Ascendant and Unbound, and then between I haven't done a palate cleanser, so to speak. Between Ascendant and Unbound, I wrote the kind of novella, which was, I guess, nice to write something in the world that wasn't book two. Um, so yeah, going straight into book three after Unbound is quite unique in that sense. I haven't had any kind of palate cleanser experience. Um, I didn't really have the time either, and I think I also can procrastinate a bit by trying to plan too much. And I was finding that the plan for book three wasn't coming as quickly as it did for two, and so I thought I have enough to get going, so I should just start
Right.
because it may just never come. Like I'm just looking at the page here and it's not really clicking. But sometimes once I just get going, as I'm sure it happens to you, stuff comes then
Yeah.
um, as you write. And it does. I've sort of done this opening with looking at the different paragons and what they're doing very briefly, and
Mhm.
that's been a hell of a lot of effort for very little words because it's a lot of different people and you've got to make up all these personalities and things like that. But going through that work is it's like, oh, I've got all these ideas now. It feels like there's lots of interesting things that we can do with these characters. So definitely just got to start. Um, what would I don't know what I would. I feel like doing like a whole book palette cleanser would be a bit much. Like maybe maybe just read something that isn't epic fantasy, or maybe doing something in the world that's like maybe working on artwork in the world or something that might be nice.
Right.
But I write so slowly. You know, I only put out like one book a year so far. I'm very slow. So like if I took a whole year as a cleanser, that wouldn't really be a
That wouldn't
that
work.
would be a whole that would be a whole main course. Yeah,
Right.
yeah.
Yeah,
So
I've
what's the
never
plan? How
taken.
many books? Oh, sorry, go on, go on.
I was going to say I haven't needed a palate cleanser in anything I've written. Like I wrote The Cast and the Outcast, one book after the other. Wrote William Wild, one book after the other. And it was like I'd finish a book. I might take, I don't know, a couple of weeks off and relax, maybe a month, and then I'd get right back into it. And after this one, I may shift gears. I don't know. I may write something else just to get something out of my system. But as far as how many books are an instrument of omens, it's probably six or seven.
Right.
I've sort of mapped it out to six or seven. It just depends. If I can fit it into six, I'm going to hold it to six. If I can't, then I'll go to seven, but it won't be eight.
Definitively not it.
No, I don't want to, have a have a massive tome in book seven. And sometimes you see it just stories just get bloated because there's too many characters, and suddenly you got to follow all
Yeah.
these different little storylines. And that's actually part of the reason why I had to step back with Unnecessary Heresy and cut all those scenes out, is I noticed that my story was getting was bloated, and the focus, which should just be on Sindra and Anya, was starting to diverge. And I didn't want that. I really wanted just a really focused story just on those two. Do you remember a story called Blood Song by Anthony Ryan?
I I do remember it. I've listened to it on audiobook years and years ago. I mean, we're talking. I think I was to listen to it around 2014 or something. Um, I don't remember too much about it, but
It was
I
a
probably will
it,
catch up.
yeah. So it was about a young boy whose father is a who's a high member of the nobility of their nation, and he goes to this school basically that trains their best warriors, their
Yeah,
absolute best warriors.
remember that. Yeah,
And it had just this dynamic focus on just one character. And um, I just thought it was an amazing story. I loved how centered it was. It was like this microscope was just beamed down on this character, and you knew everything. And it wasn't there was nothing boring about it. It was just one of the best books I've ever read. And that's actually kind of what I wanted to replicate with Sindra and Anya. I wanted everything to be lensed in on them. And with book three, when I started noticing I've got too many characters, they're not it's not what I want. I just started
yeah,
chopping them out, and suddenly
yeah.
it was back to the way I wanted it to be. So that was kind of cool. It's a
No,
little bit of sausage
it's
making, I guess, too.
well, it's cool to well, it's cool to get it right, and it's cool to realize you've got it right and to get it back to where you want it to be. I mean, it can be easy to pick out a character and maybe go off on a tangent a little bit, or you like the way that they interact in the scenes, and you start thinking about them, and then oh, you need a scene to show them this, you need a scene here, and then suddenly they
Right.
expand into a little POV. I mean, some people have were a bit annoyed with Unbound that there were more POVs because they really liked in book one that it was just
All right.
mostly all on the whole. Um, I don't think anyone was annoyed that much, but it was just
Right.
something I noticed where, um, which I can kind of get, but it's epic fantasy.
Yeah.
I don't like to go too wild. You know, I've got like enough now. I don't think I
Right.
need any more other than like maybe a one off, or I think it's good to see the antagonists. And that's
Hmm.
something I've been trying to work on because in Dragon's Blade, he didn't really there was no antagonist POV, or there was no way to see what was going on there, and it felt a little underdeveloped in that sense. And then the same in Battlespire, just the nature of that setup, like showing you what the bad guy was doing would be really it would ruin it in some ways. So I felt like in this one, and because in Ascendant you don't see what the bad guys are up to, it was important to me to try and branch out and have an antagonist POV, or at least see what that villain was up to.
Yeah.
And so I think that's worthwhile having, even if it's not the actual villain or the antagonist, but someone close to them, because that can help inform about so much of what's happening, I think. And um, it's something I'm trying to work on. So by beyond that, and then the handful of like main heroes, I think I'm
Hmm.
good. I don't think I need any more. But
Right.
it could certainly run away with you very fast, couldn't it? That's
Yeah.
one of the issues.
Yeah, that's one of the things that I noticed was that I suddenly had too many point of view characters, and that's why I pulled it back and realized I needed to make some drastic cuts and changes. But Wheel of Time actually has, I don't know how many point of view characters, 200 maybe. I mean, it's massive and it's sprawling. But that aspect is not what I wanted to do. So my love letter to Wheel of Time was not replicating Jordan's inordinate number of point of view characters. It was just, you mentioned once, we're always chasing that almost like a drug, like when that really great epic fantasy.
Yeah,
And that was one of the first things that popped into my head was when Wheel of Time was first released out of the world. There was actually an author who said something almost exactly like that. It doesn't happen very often, but when it does, the magic is indescribable. And um, that's really part of what I was hoping to do. Don't know if I did it, but it's an attempt.
it seemed. I think you've come as close as any of us by judging by how the readers have responded, and how those Amazon sales ranks have been doing. I mean, both. I mean, the magic thing of both the ebook and the audiobook have done incredibly well. It's not just sometimes you see people succeed in one or the other,
Right.
but both of them, both formats, and they just seem to have really captured people's imaginations. Those books.
I, I'm,
So I think you've hit into something.
I, I, I don't know what it is, but I'm grateful for it because I wasn't expecting it. You write and you hope people will discover your writing. You do your best to make sure that happens. But so much of it is outside of our control. It's just, why did this happen? And hopefully it's because it is doing exactly what you said. A lot of people are finding it to be what they were looking for. And that's pretty awesome.
Were you worried when you were going to focus so heavily on just a couple of characters
Yeah.
that you would run out of material, run out of arc, like,
Hmm.
and how have you found the ability to kind of keep digging? I suppose like you might want to keep the arc, but just make the arc as deep and rich as possible. But I mean, have you ever run into a head block where you just think, I'm running out now, I can't
Yeah.
keep this going, or
Yeah,
and what did you do to get
absolutely.
around it? Yeah.
So when you're just focused on two characters for an epic fantasy, that there's these books are big. Book one I think was 188K in word count, and book two was 200 and like five, and book three will be around 205,000 words, something like that. And when you're just basically using two characters to drive everything, that's hard. And there are times when you just hit a roadblock and you're like, now what happens? Because you just want to say, and he did this, he did that, and story's done. But that's not gonna that's not gonna work very well. So you really have to dig into what what's really going on underneath all of that. And sometimes you got to hit a pause and just wait for it to unblock and be okay. Thankfully, those writer's blocks don't last very long for me. At most, they might last a day, and I'll just perseverate
Oh,
over it.
that's okay.
Yeah, I mean,
Barely
it's,
count that as writer's block, man. That's it.
yeah,
That
well,
sounds like a dream.
yeah, I mean, I'll hit those blocks and I won't know what I'm doing. But the way I distract myself is I write something else in the story, and
Mhm.
and
Yeah.
then I have to suddenly bridge two scenes, and it seems like that just unclutters the mind. So instead of trying to ram my head into this immovable object, I just step around and find a different place to start writing. And then suddenly I have these two places to link. And
Yeah.
whenever I write a new scene, it's like new ideas come to me about what I wrote before and what comes forward. And so I might write a scene and I'm like, oh, that's kind of cool. I should include that in this backstory area. And so that's why the block doesn't last very long, is because I just move around it as best as I can, and then I'm okay.
Yes, I mean, I've done that. I mean, if you have something that you can skip onto, and you know you can do that, that will help. And I've got
Mhm.
there's so many points in my drafts where I just go screw it. I have a bullet
Yeah,
point that it just says bridge this dot dot dot, and that's when you get those moments where you hate your past self when you come back
yeah,
weeks later, months later. You're like, why?
yes,
I thought I had this done. Now I've got to like bridge this whole thing. Oh, damn. Um, yeah, sometimes I've done that. I've gone ahead, written written almost like end scenes, which helps inform the whole book, and then
yeah,
those end scenes will change once I get back to them. They can change a lot, or be polished a lot. But having those things written up in some form, it can be very useful.
yeah, absolutely.
I think the end scene with, I won't try to spoil it because I know the audiobook isn't out yet. The end scene in Unbound with Osric, I think I wrote that like pretty early on, and then everything kind of worked back from there a little bit. But not with the others. The others were a bit harder, but with him, that was easier to do.
So are you less
Uh,
of a linear writer, and you just kind of, or more you kind of hop around and figure out
I'm
which
pretty
side to
chronolo-
go
I'm pretty chronological. I try to go chronological as much as possible. Sometimes through a POV as opposed to not literally chronological. I'll like write a whole bunch of one POV and then switch and do a whole bunch of another POV and then switch. Um, but within the chapter or within a POV storyline, I'll hop ahead sometimes if like you say if it's going to help me just move on rather than staring at a screen and getting nothing done that day.
right?
If I have something I can do, better just to do that because something might come from literally just writing some scene that you think, oh, that's a good idea. Well, that I'll put that in as a setup somewhere else, and then you can figure it out. I try to go chronological for the most part because I think
Right.
it helps me layer this foreshadowing correctly and saves a bit of work. But who knows? I do
Yeah,
so much editing that it doesn't really matter.
right. So I write the same way. I want to write chronologically, and I rarely, skip around. Um, Sometimes I don't feel like writing a scene uh, right then and there, so I'll do something else. But I'm like you, I do so much editing. It drives me crazy when I come across authors who can write a great first draft, just lightly edit it once, and it's out the door. I'm like, how do you do that? Because I swear I must edit my stuff 6 times before it reads right.
Thankfully, they're unicorns. At least that's what I like to tell myself. Like they're so
Yeah,
rare.
yeah,
That's all I can think. Because otherwise, it would drive me nuts. Uh, the amount of editing I do is unreal. It really
yeah,
is. I don't know if that's because I think I've said this once. I don't know if I'm that smart or talented. I just work really hard, until I get it right.
yeah.
I'm just there. I'm determined to get it to somewhere that's halfway decent. Um,
I keep hoping that I'll reach a point because I've written, how many have I written? 10, 11, well, yeah, almost 11 books now. 11 books after this weekend. And I keep waiting for that moment where my writing rises in that first draft. So it's like, yeah, that was really good. Now I just need to lightly edit it and it's good to go. But it's never happened. 10 books, 11 books in, and I'm still grinding away on the edits. But the funny part is I actually like the editing process. I like that more than the first draft process. It's, when I see that I've got something to work with, it's like I can shift it around and polish it, and versus a blank screen, which is just, man, that's challenging.
yeah, I agree. Actually, I prefer to have something there. If I could like, if I could like, we talk sometimes about the horrors of AI that's going to come for us, but
Yeah,
like, if I could just sort of feed the machine the plot and stuff, and
Yeah,
it kind of spat out a version that was pretty damn rough, I'd be delighted just to then go through it, almost rewriting it, but like just having
yeah,
something there, having the thing done in some ways. I'm like, because I tend to get it gets better each time. Like a first draft is just horrible. Like, and I did it today. Like I wrote a whole bit about one of these paragons, and then I realized that did not suit the personality type that I was aiming for whatsoever. So I kind of rejigged a lot of it. But that first bit was horrible. That took ages and ages, and then I was able to readjust it and make it into what I want in about 10 minutes at the end or something. Because I just had to tweak around a few words, move some paragraphs here and there, but and then change
yeah,
how the wording. But it was really quick. Once there was something there, it went really fast. But that blank page was horrible. Always is.
yeah. I'm with you there. It takes twice as long to do that first draft as the edits. The edits just I really like that process. Even going through it a third time or a fourth time, I don't mind. It's still more fun to me in a lot of ways than that first draft, which is ugh, it's pulling teeth.
uh,
So yeah, I remember we were talking one time about AI and whether it could produce legible, fiction. And when I saw some of the stuff it was producing, I was like, that's not good, but you can edit it.
yeah,
so, so
it's
you can make,
halfway there.
yeah. I mean, that's like two-thirds of the
Yeah,
work.
we better not wish too hard because it'll
Oh
probably
yeah,
come.
yeah, probably will, and then we'll be out of a job.
Well, by that point, probably everyone is. That's
Yeah,
why we need
everyone would be.
solution.
Because if an AI can create usable fiction, there's nothing that stupid thing couldn't do except, change a light bulb and fix your toilet. Everything else other than blue collar work in the trades, it would be able to do for you, including my job even as a physician. Wouldn't that be a hoot?
Yeah, well, I mean, not to derail things, but I think there's a lot of the conversation about AI and what it's going to do is, I mean, it's a bit scary, but it's scariest because a lot of the jobs that people assume are really safe jobs might not be 20 years from now, 30 years
Yeah,
from now.
they may
Um,
not be.
Doctors
Yeah,
being one of them in some ways, because the machine will be able to diagnose everything instantly,
right.
assuming it gets the right info, right? Because it can pull on
Yeah,
every case study ever done ever. It can do things that a human brain just can't, and it's one
but
of
it's always
those.
about garbage in, garbage out. If the
Yeah,
if the initial symptoms are not true, then it won't come up with anything correctly. And that's really where the art of medicine comes in. So hopefully people still want to see human doctors, not just AI, but you never know.
I'd hope so. I'd hope so. I said the same might be true for books. Then we can give it a garbage idea, and it'll come out with a garbage story. It won't matter as long as we don't feed it the good stuff.
Yeah, don't feed
It
it
can,
the good stuff. Just feed it the
yeah,
garbage.
yeah.
Yeah,
Oh God.
Jim
It might be
Butcher
a
had,
nice time where it can proofread the books for us. That'd be nice.
right.
But yeah,
Yeah. I
after
think
that,
Jim Butcher actually had a bet with somebody. It's either an urban legend or true, or maybe not entirely true, but it was his, oh, what was that? The Furies of Calderon or something like that. Anyway,
oh,
Calderon.
Codex Avalara.
Yeah, the Codex Alera, that's it.
Yeah.
Where somebody bet him that you couldn't come up with a good story based upon a stupid idea. And apparently, Jim Butcher said, I bet you I could come up with a good story based on two stupid ideas. And so he took the lost Ninth Roman Legion, transported to a
Yeah.
fantasy land, and Pokemon. And he put it together in Codex Alera.
Like that's really not stupid, like at all. Like
No,
that's not a
it's,
dumb idea. Because you immediately think, okay, Lost Roman region, that's lots that you can do there, and you're basically saying battle magical pets. Like there's a billion, like there's nothing bad inherently bad about that at all.
for those
Anyone
of
that
us
thought the person that made that bet and thought that was a bad idea, that's why he took the bet because he was like, this is actually really good. We're gonna take these two things. You could get really specific, right? You could try to mix up way too much. You want an
yeah,
Agatha Christie epic fantasy set in a Chinese alternative reality. So you could just keep going to the point where it's just
ludicrous.
incomprehensible. Yeah, I think that would probably break it. Like, um, I think there probably are some bad ideas, but um,
Yeah. But
but
those are the ones we should feed to AI, like you were saying, not the good idea.
exactly. I
Not
mean,
our good ideas
and
anyway.
and it'll spend all its power and brain capacity trying to figure out how to make it work, and it'll just be stuck like a Microsoft thing on the loading for
So
like
circle of
forever.
doom.
It'll never get. It'll never get there. It'll never figure it out. It won't be possible. Um, so we've gone through quite a lot of things. Like, I would like to know, like, you've said you've got 11 books now. What your first book? Because you started quite a bit before
I
I
started in
did.
2014. Yeah, January of
Yeah.
2014.
What's been the biggest eye-opening experience for you so far of the whole thing? Oh, I guess when I say that, it's like what's taken you by surprise the most?
Just that I have a career as a writer. I never expected this. I didn't plan it. I mean, I was just writing a story and, I put it out there. But back in 2014, there was so little, it was hard finding cover artists. So I had a friend do my cover art. Uh, didn't have anybody to really examine the blurb. And trying to upload that stupid thing into Amazon onto Kindle as a Word document was painful. It took me a week.
As a Word doc, I've never
Yeah,
tried that, and I never want to.
and
No,
it
it's
was
bad enough.
just the formatting was brutal. But I was writing just as a hobby and just to get my head out of other things. And so I never planned on having a career. It was just kind of like, well, that would be kind of cool, but never expected. And so when the cast took off, it was just like the most wonderful thing, just because I was so grateful. I never expected 1,000 people or 100 people to read my book, and here I am, a lot more than that. It's been wonderful, that aspect, that unexpected, unanticipated career that I'd always wanted since I was 15. I'd wanted to be a writer since I was 15, but then other things got in the way, like college, med school, and all those kind of things. So
Yeah.
this was just sort of put on the shelf as a hobby, and that was awesome. Right? It has been awesome.
Do you have any plans to go completely full time?
As a writer,
Yeah.
not really. I like being a doctor and taking care of my people, my patients and my people, and so I'll always want to do some aspect of medicine, whether it's medicine's the full time and writing is the part time, or I flip the script and do writing full time and medicine part time. I don't know. I would like to do that though eventually.
I think you're well on your way by the looks of it. I mean, you're better position than most of us. We've got a question in here from A. Ryan.
Oh,
He's
right.
asking, what is your favorite series that you have read?
That's not mine.
That's
That
not
would
yours, yeah.
that would be the Riddle Master of Head,
The
which
Riddle Master of Head.
yeah, that was written back in the 1970s, I think by Patricia McKillip, and it's about a prince of a nation who likes to solve riddles, and
Yeah.
he finds a sword at the end of a riddle competition. And that's basically where the story starts, and it's just a beautifully done story. Just a beautiful story in general. But that's my favorite.
Cool. I've never heard of that. I mean, that's a bit before my time. I'm
Yeah,
I'm bad at
a
this
lot
because like
older
so
than
many
me.
people, so many of our peers talk about X Y book, and I'm just sitting there like I feel like uneducated. You know, I feel like I missed all this stuff. You know,
Yeah, that
or
that
when
would be
people say, "Oh, did you take this bit from this book for your books?" I'm like, I don't know what you're talking about. No, I made this up, and I thought I was being original. Apparently not. You know, that happens
had
all the
that
time.
happen to me a lot too, where I thought I was being original. And I mean, there's just so many books out there these days, and so many great writers who found a readership and I guess that's also been wonderful. Like in 2014, when did you first publish, Mike?
Um, it was very late 2015, but I kind of say 2016 in my head because we're talking
Right,
like late November 2015. So really 2016
early
felt like the first
2016.
year. Yeah.
So that was about when people really were saying, you can make a career of this. But 2014 and prior, it was just it was that was a unicorn. Like you can make a career as a and a well-respected career as a independently published author. It just didn't seem possible. But there are so many great.
especially in genre, especially in our genre, right? I mean, I think
Yeah.
there were people back in the 2009 days, the gold rush days, as they call them,
Yep.
making bank, but they tended to be on the romance or the thrillers or
Hmm.
whatever. It wasn't like you weren't hearing about people in epic fantasy
Yeah. I mean, the only one I know
making
of
making
from that was Michael Manning,
yeah.
from way back when. But yeah, in general, no. But there's so many great writers out there, wonderful writers who have been creating great books. And then you think you came up with something original, and no, they beat you to it.
Yeah, actually, having talked about Bloodsong, I think that was self-published originally, wasn't it?
It was. So I remember Anthony Ryan even uh, did a post on his website. He was so proud of having sold 5,000 copies because at the time that was nearly unheard of that an independently published epic fantasy author would have, sold 5,000 copies. And of course, he's gone
Yeah,
on to have it purchased by a traditionally published house, and has done fantastic with all these bestsellers and accolades. But yeah, Bloodsong was independently published.
yeah. We had it was Anthony Ryan and Bloodsong. We had Michael J. Sullivan
That's right.
as we know, and he went trad. That's only two. I know there was oh God, what's his name? It'll come to
Josiah
me. There was
Bancroft did.
someone else.
Josiah
Yeah, there was Josiah
Bancroft.
Bancroft. There was it'll come back to me. There was another sort of epic series. It'll slip my mind, and then I'll remember it tomorrow. But I'm thinking of it as more like in those earlier days. It seemed like people that were being successful shift. Well, this is just obviously the people that I know, so that's skewed data. But
Right.
it seemed like more people were shifting to trad. I haven't really seen that happen in the last few years as much.
Why do you
Um,
suppose that is? Because I think you're right. I mean, people back in 2008, 9, 10, 12, 14, if they got successful as an indie author, and then they got a trad contract, they jumped all over it. But
yeah,
I mean, we've seen some really gigantic selling books like the entire Cradle series or Iron Prince. Um, but I don't think any trad houses are. They may not even know about Cradle or Iron Prince, but they're certainly not chasing after those two authors. So, why do you think that is?
no, I uh, two reasons. The first one, which I think might be well, actually, no, this second one might be more true. The first one is I don't know if anyone's actually being offered them in the first place. So
Yeah, I think that's a
one of
big
those
part.
chicken eggs. I don't think anyone's being offered them, and so therefore no one's turning them down because I don't think because no one that we know, and not that we know everyone, but no one's coming and saying they've been offered deals.
Mhm.
I don't think the publishers necessarily go out there scouting Amazon, looking for what's coming up through the ranks to purchase it. I just don't think it's their business model. Whether they used to do that, I don't know. I don't know how this works with the likes of Sullivan and Anthony Ryan.
Mhm.
I don't know whether they just had success, got an agent from that, and then and sold it off. I'm not sure what the process was, but I almost guarantee you that they didn't have their audiobook rights taken up by Podium or someone else. And so these
Right.
days, Podiums are there, and they write, as they this is their business model. They really do check the Amazon charts, and when you shoot
Mhm.
up there as a fresh face indie, they contact you almost immediately. And
Right.
maybe it's not the right move for some people, but it seems to work well for a lot of people. And we can go back and forth and debate that to the ends of the earth. I have my own opinions on this, but a lot of people take that deal because they want audio, and fair enough. It'll be a Podium or Tantor. They take
Right.
that deal because they want audio, and but once you've sold the audio off, Trad ain't going to touch you because they
Yeah.
need all the formats. So I think that could be probably the biggest killer of it. It's just that they need all the rights, and if the audio rights were for studio, you're gubbed,
You're,
basically.
yeah.
I mean, I know
That,
I say that. Maybe if you're absolutely astronomical, because I'm pretty sure wasn't it Andy Weir in The Martian? That's what made Podium famous initially, but he managed to shift that into a trad publisher, possibly because there was a movie deal coming. That might have been too good to turn down. But I think on the whole, if you don't have access to all of your rights to sell, they probably aren't interested.
yeah, I think that's largely true. And at this point, I don't really even try to look for an agent or to sell to a trad. I just I don't have the mental desire to do that. I just too much work. I'll just write and publish.
It does almost seem like too much work for work reward balance at this point, doesn't it?
Yeah.
And as much as I'm annoyed with ACX right now because they've got unbound stuck in the queue, it's just so much nicer to have it there, see the sales, track it, get the monthly check, and get a much bigger cut of those sales. Like
Yeah.
um, these audiobooks, doing them, having the control over them was something that happened completely by accident in some ways to me, but it's been completely life changing in the last couple of years, and I don't know what it would take to get rid of those rights now. I can't imagine what someone would have to, and for me to psychologically get away from them because it's just so nice seeing them there and having that
Yeah.
power over them.
Yeah. And
And I
there's
get to do cool
also
things
that.
like when they started recording Unbound, I got to visit the studio and meet Peter and kind of
Oh, okay.
sit in the booth, and they actually offered to let me go in and read my own afterward, but I kind of got a bit freaked out and didn't. But maybe next time I'll be more prepared.
Yeah.
For that kind of stuff, that kind of stuff, just because I'm the one booking it and organizing it and then showing up and paying the bill, like I guess I get to just insert myself a little more, which was cool. That was a really cool experience. I don't think that's something every author gets to do when there's lots
Yeah.
of people in the middle.
I get to generally talk to my narrator, Nick Padell, for an hour, hour and a half before he starts recording each book just to go over pronunciations and stuff like that. And that's a lot of fun. That's actually one of the best parts of publishing is just uh, meeting these kind of people and talking to them and interacting with them. So I definitely know what you mean. I think that would be pretty thrilling. I don't know. It'd also be I think it'd be kind of intimidating, like being there while they're reading your book and you're kind of like, oh, I think I'd be like, oh, can I rewrite that real quick? I think you're frozen there, Mike. Sorry.
You're frozen now.
I'm frozen
You still
now?
with me, Davis?
Yep, I'm still here.
Okay. You see? Okay, I think we're back.
Yep.
It wasn't. It was no. It was just fun. It was really fun. It was just for a little half hour. That was fine. But
Okay.
it was mostly just really interesting. It was like being on behind the scenes of a. I love those behind the scenes on the Lord of the Rings and the Hobbit movies. Watching all that stuff, almost better than the movies in some ways. I like that. And it's like a tiny. It's nothing like it, but there's like a guy with like all the equipment, and
Mhm.
there's a studio, and it seems very professional. So it's almost like being that little behind the scenes moment, even though it's your book. But also just hearing the narrator do something live was really interesting because in the final end product, it's perfectly smooth. But when Peter's going through it, he stumbles, and then he swears, and then he backtracks and starts again. But it's all very smooth, so it's quite
Oh, there
funny
is.
hearing him like messed up. Yeah, hearing these characters swear because he kind of keeps the voice as and then goes back. So it was like quite funny. Um,
Oh, that would be
you almost wish that you could keep a few bloopers, but that's a lot of audio to crank through for
fun.
bloopers.
Yeah, just for bloopers. You'd probably find the
Yeah.
time.
Yeah. Um, Davis, this has been really, really fun. It's been about an hour, which is what I like to keep it to.
Yep,
And I won't want to take up too much of your time, but hopefully we can do this again sometime in the future. Perhaps when
absolutely.
book three comes out.
Yep.
Um, but thanks for coming along. Before you go, because this is going to get uploaded onto YouTube, would you like to tell everyone where is the best place where they can come and check out your work?
Absolutely. So the best place would be your Amazon store, wherever you happen to be. And the books are available on in audio. Nick Padell does the narration, so you can get that on Amazon too, or you can go to Audible. And so those are the two best places to get my books.
Fantastic, and they are excellent books. Okay, so I'm like 25% into Testament of Steel, and I will finish it. I had a bit of a slump. I'm going to come out.
All
I
right.
actually, before we go, I really liked how when you put those when you put the in-world terms, like I guess we're from the Indian kind of world building
Mhm.
background, putting them into the italics. It just sort of felt like a nice touch that I'd never seen before, and I thought that's a really nice way of doing it.
Well, thank you.
I don't know if
My
you ever
editor
ever heard that,
suggested
but
that.
oh, did they? well, they well, I thought it was a nice touch. It kind of it draws attention to it, but in a way that you understand that this it adds that little mystical element somehow to the writing just by that, which is really interesting.
Well, thank you.
So I look forward to continuing the adventure. I'm
Absolutely.
trying to finish off Cradle. I'm trying to finish off Cradle, so that's a few books to go through.
A whole series or just the last one?
No, I'm catching up. I'm on book 8, so I've
Oh
got 8,
gosh.
9, 10.
Yeah. 8, 9,
Yeah,
10. Yeah, number 10, number one in the store for like 3 days. Good on Will.
just
Incredible.
next level stuff. I look forward to the Cradle animation for sure.
Yeah, me too. That's what I want to see is the Cradle animated series because well, anyway, we're closing down everything right now because we're supposed to cut things off, but that series is fantastic and it would translate so well to an animated or even live action series that I really hope that it has an opportunity to do that.
If anything does, it's got to be that. And I
Yeah,
think before we carry on, we will leave it there for now. But it's great
yep,
talking to you, Davis. Catch you
absolutely.
next time.
All right.
Bye, man.
See ya.
Bye bye.